Hello. Welcome to our Read Aloud. This is Miss Preciado, and I will be reading the story Grace for President, written by Kelly DePoco, pictures by Luyuan Pham. One morning in September, Miss Barrington rolled out a big poster with all of the president's pictures on it. Grace Campbell could not believe her eyes. Where are the girls? That is a very good question, said Miss Barrington. The truth is, our country has never had a woman president. No girl president ever? Grace asked. No, I'm afraid not, said Miss Barrington. Grace sat at her desk and stewed. No girls? Who'd ever heard of such a crazy thing? Finally, she raised her hand. She does not look happy. Yes, Grace? I've been thinking it over. I'd like to be president. Several students in the class laughed. That wasn't very nice. Well, I think that's a star-spangled idea, Grace, said Miss Barrington. In fact, we can have our own election right here at Woodrow Wilson Elementary. The snickering in the room stopped. Grace smiled. Would anyone else like to run for president? Miss Barrington asked the class. Nobody raised their hand. Becoming president was going to be easy, Grace thought. The next day, Miss Barrington made an announcement. In the name of democracy, I have invited Mr. Waller's class to join our election. Their class has nominated Thomas Cobb to be their presidential candidate. Grace's heart sank. Thomas was the school spelling bee champion. His experiments always took a blue ribbon at the science fair, and he was even captain of the soccer team. Becoming president wasn't going to be so easy after all, Grace thought. Well, he looked like a good person. He has a bunch of awards and he does well in the soccer. Grace looks worried. The teachers put the names of all 50 states and the District of Columbia into a hat. Everyone except for Grace and Thomas got to choose a state. So these numbers with these states are going to come up later, but if you can see, it has Missouri 11. So that means when Missouri votes, they have 11 votes to their state to go towards the president for the Electoral College. I'm Texas, said Anthony. I'm New Hampshire, said Rose. I'm Michigan, said Robbie. What does the number 17 mean? Each state is assigned a number of electoral votes. That number is determined by how many people live in that state, said Miss Barrington. Each of you will be a representative of your state. Altogether, our country has 538 electoral votes, Mr. Waller explained. On election day, the candidate who receives 270 electoral votes or more wins the election. Why 270? Asked Rose. That's more than half of all the electoral votes, Mr. Waller said. Becoming president really wasn't going to be so easy, Grace thought. So Grace needs 270 of the electoral votes to win, or more. Each week, the teachers set aside time for the candidates to meet with their constituents. So there's Grace. That's her running for president for her class. Polls were taken, voters were making their choices. And then there's Thomas. Grace continued to campaign at recess. At recess, she gave speeches. During lunch, she handed out free cupcakes, and after school, she held rallies. So Grace is doing a lot. She's just passing cupcakes, talking to all her classmates. She's doing everything she can. Meanwhile, Thomas wasn't worried. He had cleverly calculated that the boys held slightly more electoral votes than the girls. So Thomas thinking if all the boys voted for him, he should win. At recess, Thomas studied his spelling words. During lunch, he worked on his latest science experiments, and after school, he played soccer. So he's just doing his normal stuff that he's been doing. He's not doing anything to get more votes. Even before the election, Grace made good on her promises. She joined the safety squad, she organized a school beautification committee, and she volunteered her time in the school cafeteria. Oh, Grace is showing that she wants to work hard for this. In early November, Woodrow Wilson Elementary hosted a special Election Day assembly. Grace and Thomas took their places on stage as the school band began to play. Henry was the first representative to approach the microphone. The Yellow Hammer State of Alabama cast its 9 electoral votes for Thomas Cobb. Fletcher said, "The last frontier state of Alaska cast its 3 electoral votes for the best man for the job, Thomas Cobb." Hannah called out, "The Great Canyon state of Arizona cast its 10 electoral votes for Grace Campbell." And so it went. State after state after state cast their electoral votes. The scoreboard in the gymnasium kept track of all the totals. The voting demonstration was quickly coming to an end. Clara approached the podium. "The Badger State of Wisconsin cast its 10 votes for my best friend, Grace Campbell." Grace looked at the scoreboard. Thomas had 268 electoral votes. She had 267. There was only one state still unaccounted for. So right now Grace is winning, but there was one person still needing to vote. Wyoming. Oh, it's a boy. Who does Thomas think he's going to get all the votes for? Thomas grinned. Grace felt sick. Sam looked up to the microphone. He looked at Thomas. He looked at Grace. He looked down at Grace's handmade flag. Sam didn't say a word. "What are you waiting for?" Thomas whispered. The band stopped playing. All eyes were on Wyoming. Finally, Sam cleared his throat. "The Equality State of Wyoming cast its 3 electoral votes for Grace Campbell." Yay, she won! The gymnasium erupted in loud cheers and a few boos. Miss Barrington approached the podium. "With 270 electoral votes, the winner is Grace Campbell." Thomas looked stunned. Grace hugged Sam. "Why did you do it?" she asked. Sam handed Grace his flag. "Because," he said, "I thought you were the best person for the job." The following week, the students in Miss Barrington's class were preparing for their career day presentation. Grace volunteered to go first. She stood at the front of the room and glanced at the poster still hanging on the wall. "My name is Grace Campbell, and when I grow up, I'm going to be President of the United States." This time, everyone believed that she would. And there she is, getting sworn in as as the President of the United States. And that was Grace for President by Kelly DiPoco and pictures by Luen Pham. So, like every book I've had for you, I've had questions. So my first question is, would you vote for Grace or Thomas as your class president, and why? What do you think would make a good president? And how would you campaign to be president of your classroom? Of your classroom.